Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Today I'm very excited because a friend of mine, Tony, he's lending us his GT4 RS to review. So this is the first time that I'll be driving the GT4 RS. So it'll be very interesting to see what the differences are between the 4RS and my GT3. The 718 GT4 RS that we are reviewing today is from production year 2022. It has a 4-liter naturally aspirated flat 6 engine, the same engine as my GT3, and it produces 500 PS and 450 Nm of torque, and the red line's 9,000 RPM. It's a very exciting engine. Just by looking at the specs, the size of the GT4 RS is actually not that much smaller than the 992 GT3. The weight is a bit lighter though. It's at 1,415 kgs. It's also spec'd with the YSUC package, the PCCB brakes, and also the magnesium wheels. The 992 GT3 that we are comparing the GT4 RS to has the same 4-liter naturally aspirated flat 6 engine that produces a bit more power. It has 510 PS and more torque at 470 Nm. And the maximum torque comes in a bit earlier at 6,100 RPM. It's also interesting to see that the GT3 has a shorter wheelbase compared to the GT4 RS. This is probably due to the rear engine layout where they need to leave more room for the engine. Just quickly sharing with you my fuel consumption for the GT3. I've now done about 5,000 kilometers. And the fuel consumption is sitting at 16.1 liters per 100 kilometers. Alright, we're inside the GT4 RS. Firstly, the key is actually different. So I have to insert the key before I can start the car. So let's do that. Ooh, sounds pretty good. Sounds similar to my GT3 because it's the same engine. But you can feel the vibration and the noise more closer to me because right behind me it's a mid-engine car. It's a car that I've always wanted to drive because I own a GT3 and I know the GT4 RS has the same engine but different chassis. This is a mid-engine car compared to the GT3, which is a rear-engine car. So yeah, again, it will be very interesting to see how they are different in terms of sound, handling, the dynamics of it. So right now we are just driving normally on the road. Everything's set to normal. Exhaust is not on. Suspension too soft. Yeah, it's actually, I feel, just cruising on a normal road. It's very quiet. 60 kilometers per hour, 7th gear already. Very quiet. As long as I don't rev the engine up, it's a very quiet and civilized car. But if I step on it, whoa, the induction noise is pretty amazing. Whoa, it's right behind me, the induction noise. Wow, it's something different. This is really different in terms of sound to my 911 GT3. My GT3, you can't really hear much induction noise. It's mostly exhaust noise coming from the back. And because the engine is quite far away from the driver, so everything feels a bit more distant. But in the 4RS, everything is closer to you. The engine's right at the back. The airbox is right at the back. And the intake is right next to my ear. So you can hear the airbox sucking in air. Wow, this is something else. There's no modes in the GT4 RS. All you get is an exhaust button, a PDK Sport button, and a suspension button. That's it. So basically, if you want a more sporty driving feel, you push the PDK Sport. You want louder sound, you push the exhaust button. And if you want a firmer suspension to drive on track, you just push the suspension button to make everything firmer. The seating position is, again, quite similar to the 911. You sit quite low. So it feels like you are in a supercar. It's very, very flat, so that's really good. These seats are the same as my GT3. They are the carbon fixed bucket seats. Looks amazing. And yeah, again, it feels almost exactly the same as my GT3. And Tony has spec'd with the harnesses. So again, we have the harness down here, harness at the back, so we can use the harness on track if you want to. Let's try with the sport exhaust on, see how that feels. Wow. Yeah, with the sport exhaust on, yeah, definitely it's louder. It's more noise coming from the back. So let's set it to PDK Sport with the exhaust button on. Oh. Oh my god. Oh, I love that sound. Sounds so good. I have to say, in the sound department, it's definitely much louder and sounds much better than my GT3. My GT3 sounds good, but you have to rev it past 5,000 RPM. And in terms of steering feel, I think they are very, very similar. But I probably have to say the GT3 has a bit more feedback in terms of its steering feel. I'm not sure if it's because of the double wishbone suspension. It gives the steering wheel a bit more feedback, a bit more reaction. Overall, I just feel the GT3 in terms of steering feel has a bit more movement, or it communicates to you regarding the front end of the car a bit better. The GT4 RS handles really well, but it's a different sensation compared to the 992 GT3, because the 992 GT3 has double wishbone suspension in the front, whereas the 4RS has McPherson struts in the front. So in terms of its feeling of turning into a corner, I feel the 992 GT3 feels a bit more accurate and a bit more planted. The 4RS is also still very, very good, but it's just not as accurate or planted as the GT3. Somehow the 4RS has a little bit more understeer. I don't know why that is. Probably because it's just how the suspension is set up. But once you pass the apex, if you give it a bit more throttle in the 4RS, the car is more willing to step out or rotate. With the 4RS, it's more playful. You can play with the throttle to control the rotation of the car. So it's a very different sensation. It's very interesting. That makes this GT4 RS, I think, a bit more fun to play with on the road. The brakes are definitely better in the GT4 RS because Tony has spec'd carbon ceramics. So in terms of the braking power, the initial bite, and in terms of the braking confidence, is better than my GT3. My GT3 is the standard steel brakes. They are still very good, but with the steel brakes, sometimes you have to use a bit more force. You have to step down a bit harder to give it more bite. Okay, let's try to shift manually. Third gear, fourth, fifth. Wow, super fast. Yeah, basically it's the same PDK as my GT3. So lightning fast shifts, very nice to use, great on track. The PDK on track is just a weapon. It's so fast. Even driving on back roads, you can shift manually using the gear lever. I usually like to do that. It's very fun. It's more fun than using the pedals, I feel. Whoa, 9,000 RPM. Woo! Wow, sounds so good. I actually think this car, everyone's saying it's too noisy, too crazy, but I think it's actually very, very good, because if you dial everything down, just switch everything off, switch the exhaust button off, driving normally, cruising, it's actually not that bad. It's actually quite quiet. But if you want to have that visceral experience, you just dial everything up and it becomes another different animal. It's a totally different tone compared to the GT3. The GT3, the whole sound feels a bit more refined, feels a bit more insulated. But with the GT4 RS, it feels the sound just feels more visceral, more out there, more open. I have to say the 4RS, even though the engine is the same as the GT3, but they are such different cars. I think the 4RS, again, as I said, the size is smaller, sounds better, and it's a bit more playful, the rear end, so it's just a bit more fun. But the GT3 feels a bit more serious, a bit more accurate, a bit more refined, and in terms of sound department, it's not as good as the 4RS, definitely. Let's quickly take a look outside the GT4 RS. So it's wrapped in a satin matte wrap. Underneath is the GT silver color. It looks very, very amazing. And this is spec'd with the wide-side package, so you can see there is exposed carbon everywhere, the wing, the mirror cap, the side part, the intake area. It's all in carbon, and also the bonnet as well. So it looks very, very amazing. I love these necker ducts that feeds air to the brakes. And we have vents on top of the wheel arch with the RS cars to allow better airflow or air management. And we can see the front splitter and the air vent on the side to manage airflow. There is an air vent in the front to allow air to escape from the front radiator. You can see the lights. Very nice, a lot of detail in the lights. So Tony has spec'd this car with the magnesium wheels, and they're really, really light as well compared to the forged aluminium wheels. And he's also got the carbon ceramics with this car. The stopping power is pretty amazing. It's better than my GT3 because these discs are bigger, and also it has more initial bite. The 4RS comes with everything lined in Alcantara. They call it race tags in Porsche terms. Everything looks very high quality, and also a lot of carbon trim in the GT4 RS as well. And we have the Weissach plaque. Also on the headrest as well. And we can see the titanium roll cage at the back. And the most important thing, the carbon airbox and the air ducts from the side window connects directly into the airbox right behind the driver. Really, really cool. These carbon seats are the same as my GT3. They're actually quite comfy and looks amazing as well. There are no buttons on the steering wheel. That's actually quite good. So when you are driving, you don't touch any of the buttons. In my GT3, when I was driving on track, I kept on touching the buttons. It's actually quite annoying. And the only buttons you have are these very nice looking pedals. They're made out of metal. Sounds very good, very tactile. And the size of the steering wheel is basically the same as my GT3. Thickness feels the same as well. It's also lined in Alcantara, feels very nice. We have a 3-ring gauge cluster. So you see the speed, the rev meter right in the center, GT4 RS, and a multi-function screen on the right hand side. In the center, we have the infotainment system, all your buttons for your radio and your air conditioning. We have carbon trim here. The gear lever is the same, exactly the same as my GT3. Very nice. This is Alcantara as well. We have a few buttons here. We have the PDK Sport. We have the exhaust button, the lift, front axle lift, the suspension button to firm the suspension up, auto start stop, ESC off, ESC and TC off. And with this, I love these. These are cup holders you can stow away and push them out as well. What an experience driving the GT4 RS. Thank you again to Tony for letting me drive his car and review the GT4 RS. It's so amazing. It's such a fun car to drive. So back in my GT3, once I get in, started driving, the difference is so obvious. There's much less noise coming from the back, especially the intake noise. The induction noise. Basically in the 911 GT3, there's none. In the 4RS, once you get in, start driving, the induction noise is always there. It's a lot of difference. And I can also feel that the 911 is a bit more refined, but it's also a bigger car. So driving on back roads, you have to be a bit more mindful. The throttle response, the throttle mapping is also a bit different comparing these two cars. Driving them back to back, I have to say I think the 992 GT3 has a little bit better throttle response somehow. The throttle input and the way the car pushes forward is a bit more direct, a little bit less lag. In the 4RS, the throttle response, I feel it's a little bit dialed back. I'm not sure why though, because they both have the same engine, the same gearbox. They are also both PDK. Probably just how Porsche tuned the software. They are, in my opinion, very different cars, the GT4 RS compared to the GT3. The 4RS, I feel the suspension is more compliant to road conditions. It's less harsh. There's more sound, obviously. It sounds better, and it's more playful compared to the GT3. The GT3 feels a bit more refined, and also it feels a little bit more serious. I suspect the differences in the driving dynamics between these two cars are not just due to the engine placement, but also the GT3 has a bit more technology, and also it has a shorter wheelbase. Just the fact that the GT3 has double wishbone suspension in the front, wider rear tracks, and also it has rear wheel steer function at the back. All these things add up to make the GT3 feel like it rotates better through corners, and it's a more stable car to drive as well, and has better rear traction. If you want to drive both on track, depending on what kind of driver you are, some people actually prefer the GT4 RS because it's more feelsome, it's more playful, it's less planted, so requires a bit more skill or more involvement from the driver to drive it well on the track. So some people might prefer that, but then some people might prefer the GT3 where it's got rear wheel steer, it's more planted, it's got front double wishbone suspension. So in terms of, I don't know, chasing lap times and driving it quick, it's probably easier driving the GT3 on track. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this comparison between the 4RS and the GT3. Please stay tuned for more contents like this. Please subscribe and hit that like button and support our channel. That would be great. Hope to see you next time. Bye.